some arguments that are used for the existence of God. And remember that in preface to that, I said that in and of themselves, they have to add up together in order to make an argument that has got some substance to it. So any one of them by themselves is kind of lame, okay? And secondly, the arguments for the existence of God are based on human reasoning. And so because of that, we can err. Because the Bible does not seek to prove the existence of God. It just assumes his existence. Right from Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God. And it doesn't go into some big, long dialogue about who God is and how he was made, and because he wasn't made, he always was. It just assumes his existence. So, many of these arguments are based on what we would call philosophy. So they are somewhat, for the Western mindset, us, they're somewhat esoteric. They're kind of out there sort of things, odd sort of things to think about. So I'm not going to go into any one of them. We talked about the cosmological argument, the teleological argument. Even the names themselves are somewhat odd. We've just finished up with those, and I put in a page here, page 26, that is a chart that we're going to need to fill in some lines there, put some words under the descriptions in the boxes, to put a word there, a modern word, okay? And again, some of these are not words that we're real familiar with. Some of them are. But when we're done, we're going to draw a line down through the chart to come out on the bottom right-hand corner for the bottom box that talks about a personal, infinite God who is beyond the universe, but he acts within it. Okay, that's where we need to land as evangelical Christians. That's where we are. That's where I am. That's what I teach. But there are a whole bunch of other worldviews about God that are in existence in our world. And so that's what this chart does. It kind of summarizes them all. And there's 7 of them. And so let's go down through it. And I'm guessing you are even going to put a name there, or could guess a name that would go on the line under the first box on the right side, or left side there, where it says no God or no gods. What do we call that? Atheism. Yeah, that's atheism. That's 2 Greek words put together. Theos, which is the word for God, and you put an A in front of it, or in the Greek alphabet, it's an alpha. It's called an alpha privative. And it would be equivalent in our English to the word non or no. So the alpha privative deprives the word of its meaning. It's the opposite. So theism is that there's a God. Atheism says no God. So we're familiar with that word. We use that when we hear about it, and we use it. So then the other one on the other side is many gods. And what do we call that? Polytheism. That's polytheism.
Like in
P-O-L-Y theism. Yeah, T-H-E-S-I-M. So poly means many. So now we're talking about many of the ancient religions were polytheistic. The Romans, the Greeks, the Norsemen, and so on. And so we see that represented quite graphically today in much of what occurs from Marvel Comics and the Marvel universe of movies. So we see Thor and Loki and all these other guys. That actually comes out of ancient Nordic theology, polytheism. You had supreme god who was Zeus, and he's up in the clouds somewhere, see, and he's got all of these underling gods like Thor with the hammer and all these sorts of things, and that's polytheism. And many religions in the world are polytheistic. So the next line down, we have to differentiate between a God who is finite and a God who is infinite. So a finite being would be somebody that's limited, some kind of brackets on his existence. Maybe it's his power, or maybe it's his knowledge, or maybe a combination of those. So that's how we go down the left-hand side of the chart. All of those isms are saying that there is a God, but he is limited. Okay? And so then on the other side, we would say that God is infinite. He is not limited. Obviously, we are believers in an infinite God. He has no limitations. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. He's everywhere present. All of those things. And that's basically where we're going to start going into each one of those omnis, as they're called, omniscient and omnipresent, and all of those kind of things. So already you and I would break the line under the words one God, and we would go to the right. And we're going to go down through that track. So let's do the left-hand side first, where gods are limited. Okay. So the first one we run into there is that big box that says that it's a finite God. He's beyond the universe, but he acts within it in limited ways. That you can put on that double line. There's two words there, and that is finite Godism. Finite Godism. We don't hear too much about that one. It's kind of expressed itself in our world, but we don't. Finite Godism isn't a word that we kick around the lobby when we're getting a donut. We don't use that term very much. The next box down the line is that God is within the world and identified with it. Okay, so in other words, this is everything that we see in reality is there's a God inside of it. Okay, he's limited. I shouldn't even be using the pronoun he, because there are some of them that it's female. But at any rate, this God then is identified with the world, and he's in it. He isn't the world, but he is in the world. So he's in nature and all that sort of thing. So how's that expressed then in modern thinking? That would be like calling it Mother Nature. Okay, Mother Nature would be as an example of the fact that there is a God, but he's limited, and he is identified with the world. Mother Nature. It's expressed also, you may hear some, probably not, but maybe some more recent with Gaiaism. G-A-I, Gaia, or Gaia. It's actually G-I-A, Gaia. So that's another kind of a way of saying Mother Nature. Gaia is a Greek word which means woman, okay? Female. So you've got this idea that there's some kind of that Mother Nature takes care of things, see, in the world, and it's expressed in physical realities like fish swim upstream to spawn, or in Mother Nature is taking care of all that. And we actually talk about Mother Nature. Mother Nature's been really good to us this winter, hasn't she? We've had a real easy winter. Mother Nature's been really good to us. That's this idea here. So now I'll have to spell it for you, but you need to write on that line, write pan, P-A-N, Lynn's getting scrambled here today.
No, you go ahead and do it.
Pan, and then
Pantheism.
N-E-N, P-A-N-E-N, and then the word theism, T-H-E-I-S-M, panentheism. That's this idea of Gaia, or Mother Earth.
God is in nature.
Yeah.
Pantheism.
Yeah, it's a force out there. And even in, say, the Star Wars series, there's this kind of panentheism kind of a thing, see, with the midichlorians that are in certain people that enable them to have a stronger affinity to the force, that kind of thing. That idea is there in our culture and comes out in such things as the Star Wars movies. So that's the finite side of it all. So pan means many. There's that multiple idea again. And then the en part is the Greek word for in, I-N. So panentheism, inside of the earth. Not the earth itself, but in the earth, living in it and moving in it and behind all the scenes and so on. So now let's go down the other side, where we're going to talk about an infinite God. And you'll notice that there's actually a couple more boxes on this side. So we've got an infinite God. And the first box you come to is a box that says that God is identified with the world. He's not in it, he is it. Okay? So that we call pantheism. Notice that the only difference between the two words is the en in the middle of it. So he's not in it, he is it. Okay, pantheism. So it basically teaches that matter, all matter. And I know that I'm probably goofing this up and leading you to think that what I'm talking about here is this sphere that we call the earth, this ball. It's much bigger than that. It's all of reality. All of the stars and the sun and the moon and all of the stuff that's way out there, that's all part of it. It isn't just Mother Earth. It's all of these forces that are out there, okay? So it teaches that matter is but a form of God. It's worshiping the creation rather than the creator. The nature is God. See, all of nature, the stars, and we see that expressed in all kinds of weird ways down through time, and even into today, where we see the ancient Babylonians worshiping the sun and the moon, and the Egyptians worshiping the sun and the moon. That is a form of pantheism. Okay. Now let's go, next big box down there, which is filled in for you in bold, is that God is not identified with the world. We're still talking about a infinite God. So let's jump back up to pantheism and say, well, what's the infinitude about that? And that is that there is no end to it. We keep seeing that the universe keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know if you've paid any attention at all to recent stuff from like the Hubble telescope and so on, where we're seeing more and more and more stuff out there. We haven't found the end of it yet. Well, see, that's the infinitude of it. It just goes on and on and on. It never ends. There's no end to the universe's reality. There's no last stars. There's no edge to the expanding universe. It's just everywhere, and we keep seeing that. Well, that's pantheism. Just more recently here now, this is a little bit of a segue off the side, but brought to my mind, and that is that Voyager, I can't remember the number, it's maybe Voyager 2, has now traveled beyond what's called the heliosphere. In other words, that's the edge of our solar system and the influence of our sun. We put that bugger out there. It's that funny little ball with the big antenna sticking out on the sides of it, and a kind of a satellite dish on it. And I don't remember what we launched that bugger a long time ago. And it's now traveled clear out past Pluto, and it's now exited the influence of the sun. It's past the heliosphere. It just keeps going and going, and still sending signals back, by the way, interestingly enough. So,
But it takes a while.
long time now, just because of distance. But at any rate, that's this whole idea of the universe that's just encompasses everything, and that's pantheism. So now let's talk about systems. Two of them we're going to talk about, that in which God is not identified with the world. And the first one is there, that in that first box, called "God does not intervene in the world, but he is exclusively transcendent." Boy, a whole bunch of great big words here. But at any rate, what that simply means is he is completely outside and above all of this reality. So he is transcendent. He transcends it. He's bigger than it. And but he doesn't bother with it. Okay? So he made it, and then he went away. That's the idea behind this. And that is called deism. D-E-I-S-M. Now, deism was extremely popular in the beginning of the 18th century. So we're talking 1700s up through probably most of the 1700s. So the formation of our nation, which we always put the watermark at 1776, that's when the Declaration of Independence was put together and all those sorts of things, or thereabouts. Most of those men were seriously influenced by this box. That is, that God made it all, he wound it all up, made it so that it really works well, and then he went away somewhere. So he is transcendent, he's above it, but he doesn't intervene in it. He doesn't bother with it anymore. He just went away somewhere. So people like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and so on were influenced by deism. So much so that Thomas Jefferson took his Bible and he cut it apart to remove all of the pieces in the pages that had anything to do with supernatural occurrences like miracles. Because if you have a deistic God that's outside of it all and he doesn't mess with it, miracles are impossible. God doesn't mess with it anymore, so they must be excised from my book, from my Bible. So Thomas Jefferson's Bible was completely full of snipped out holes in it. But of course, that they are, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, those kind of guys, they're on the right side of the chart. They do believe in one God. They do believe in the fact that he's infinite. They don't believe that he's in the world or identified with it, but they do believe that he went away. He's not personal. So supernatural events in the scripture couldn't have happened, so Thomas Jefferson chose to snip his Bible apart that way. So that leaves us with the bottom box. And that's where you and I should land, and that is that we have a personal, infinite God that is beyond the universe, but yet he acts within it. That is our God. He made it, and he's still here intervening in it. Thank God for that. And we call that theism, Theism, theism. You've noticed that it's been a piece of almost all the other words we've filled in already, but this now is the God who built it, cares for it, and intervenes in it. So we now have a God who can send his Son to die for us, who can and does and interested in us in our prayer life, in our personal life, in our growth life, in our spiritual life, in the events of the world, in that he takes care of things, he raises up nations and causes nations to fall, all of that kind of stuff. That is the God of the Bible. And we see that very graphically from Genesis to Revelation, even to the point where we say he's coming back again someday. He isn't just has gone away and disappeared. He still intervenes, but he will personally return. And so that is theism. So that is kind of a summarization after we've looked at all of the arguments for God's existence. Now we put it into a chart that say, okay, if there is a God there, down the right-hand side of the chart. How does he relate to us in the world? And that's why we have these different boxes going down the right side of the chart. The left side says there isn't one. He's either nature itself, or there isn't anything at all. It's just matter, and it just popped into being from nowhere by time and chance. So that chart kind of summarizes where you and I live. Now, I'm guessing that by the time we got to the bottom there of that box, that last box, that you probably were there already in your thinking. You may not have expressed it in the fact that he's personal, that he's infinite, that he has he's beyond the universe and yet he acts in it. You may not have been able to articulate it in that way, but you would have certainly understood that the God that you believe in hears prayers, answers prayers, is interested in us personally, those kinds of things. So all we really did here is just put fancy words to something you probably already understood anyway. So if you have a marker of some kind, what I did is I took right underneath the 7 major worldviews box, and I just highlighted this line as it comes down and goes over here like this, and down to the bottom box here, so that you can kind of follow the chart to end up where we live today, in this church, in this reality, in my mind to you, in the teaching from this class and that sort of thing. Let's take a look at page, any questions there? Baffling kind of stuff? Yeah, it is kind of, some of it is sort of, especially those panentheism things and some of that stuff is.
What about Native Americans?
Lynn's passing a highlight marker around. Okay. So page 27, you're going to encounter these at the end of every section. Yeah.
Dennis has a question.
Oh, yeah.
What about Native Americans? Is it mother, there's a greater being for them? Is it?
A word for what?
There's a greater being?
The Native Americans.
Oh, they were animists. So where would they fit on this chart here? Let's go back to it.
Many gods?
They would be probably expressed in the bottom box on the left-hand side.
Okay.
They were probably panentheists. Now, they wouldn't have known that word. That's an invented word that would be more recent. But what they were doing is essentially worshiping nature.
Like the white buffalo. You've already,
Sure. It's a bit more complicated. They weren't necessarily worshiping the buffalo. Yes, they kind of were. It was a venerated object in creation, and they never killed it, and all those sorts of things. But really, the way they saw that animal was that it was a symbol of the spirit that's in the world.
Right.
And it expressed itself out into a buffalo, and particularly a white one. All the buffaloes were sacred to them. And that's understandable. I mean, the whole center of their economy revolved, at least the Plains Indians, revolved around the buffalo. It provided them with food and weaponry and all the things that they used to get warm with in the wintertime, and all of those things, the bones they used, the sinew they used, all that. It would only make sense that would be venerated in their culture. But they didn't necessarily see the buffalo as a god, but he was more like a symbol, a representation of the god. So we use the words totemic symbols, a totem. And you notice the northwestern Indians over in the coast there in Oregon and Washington, they actually made totem poles, and on it would be a whale or a shark or a salmon. And those things came out of nature. They were elements of nature, animals in nature that were food sources central to their survival. And so they would see those as being provided by Mother Nature for their existence. And we hear stories about Native Americans particularly. And that isn't unique to Native Americans. We see that in cultures like where the kids are over there, where they have the idea that the animal gives up its life so that your life can be continued. And so there'd be times when they thank the animal for giving up its life, that kind of a thing. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to any of the pictographic kind of stuff that's around Montana. There's one of them up by Billings. It's very, very blurred and almost gone now. Pictograph Caves, up over the top of the hill from Johnson Lane, where you turn off there. There's an archaeological site. It's just kind of an alcove into the cliffs there. So if you're down coming into Billings down there by the gas cracking plant, the big, and you look and you see the big cliff there across the river, that great big high cliff that's called Sacrifice Cliff. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, beyond that, over the hill from that, is this place. Well, in that, again, the representations are very, very faint. I don't remember when Lynn and I were there probably some years ago now, but you could hardly see anything. But the Indians had painted on there, and one of the things that they would do is, so they draw an animal. So we've got this deer here with forks and so on, and his nose and so on. I'm not going to draw this very good, but anyway, here's this deer. So they would draw this, and they had this thing called a heart. That's not the right word. I can't remember what it's called. But it was a symbol of the representation of the life force of the animal coming out in his breath from his insides, from his heart and so on. That was an attempt on their part to show that the animal had life, and it was expressed in his breathing and all of that sort of thing, the heartbeat. And so they drew this kind of lightning bolt-like looking thing coming out of him. And so you'll see these pictographic representations of these animals with this, I'm not remembering the name, it's either a heart line or a lifeline or something that archaeologists have called it. And they've figured out that that's what the Indians were trying to show, is that this animal was alive, but it gave up its life to the human so that the human could continue to live. So that is an idea that's panentheistic, expressed that nature is giving us sustenance and life. It goes way, way back to times even in the Old Testament where you've got, well, there's a kind of a collection of isms off of that chart there. Like, for example, they would be polytheistic as well as panentheistic. And then we would say that they were animistic, in that they were worshiping animals, or the animism, the life force in a creature. And that would be their god. So certain cultures, like over in the islands, there's a shark god. And it makes sense because the great whites, which they do have there, are powerful creatures. See, they're dangerous. They will eat you if you get in the water and one of them's there. And so it becomes a symbol of power and like a godlike creature. See, so over there, the shark on certain tribal cultures would be somewhat analogous to the white buffalo with our American Indians. And you got to remember that because we live in Montana and we're surrounded by the remnants of tribes that did occupy this land before the white men took it over, like the Sioux and the Crow and those cultures, that we think kind of what Indians are supposed to be like by the Indians that we know. But you get back further east and other, even down into Central America and so on, those Native Americans had totally different kinds of cultures. So you get down into the Mayan culture and the Aztec culture in Central America and Northern South America. Now what you have is human sacrifices, in which take the life force out of a human by sacrificing them. So you have anybody ever watch Mel Gibson's movie called Apocalypto, which is an examination of I think it's Aztec, but I can't remember, where you see the story of a young man named Jaguar Pa, who is captured by an adjacent tribe that is sacrificing humans. And they have the big pyramids, and at the top of it is the sacrifice altar, and they take you up there under captivity and spread you out over the altar like this. It's a stone, and then they chop you open through your chest here and pull your heart out and present it to God. And so you're sacrificing the life force of a human to the God. And so in the movie, there's an eclipse that occurs, and so the priests are sacrificing humans up on top of this altar there. We're talking hundreds of thousands of sacrifices, to the point where the fields around the town are literally nothing but corpses of people that have been sacrificed. And Gibson does a good job of showing that there. But at any rate, the priests with the big feathered headdresses and the pierced noses and all this stuff, they're using this jade knife to cut people open. And the depiction on the walls is the gods are looking down, and you're feeding them a human, see? It's not the heart. He's not eating the heart. He's eating the heart, which is the center part of the human. That is where his life is coming from, and you hand it to God, and he eats that. So you're appeasing these malevolent gods so that the eclipse, the sun will come back, see? So the sun is going to go away. And of course it does, because it's eclipsed by the moon between it. They don't understand astronomy. Well, actually, there's a pretty good idea that the priests did understand astronomy and were using an eclipse to fool the population into thinking that sacrifices were necessary, because you had to feed the god, otherwise the sun wouldn't come back, see? That kind of a thing. It's super complicated once you put it all together. But at any rate, there's another example of this life force now of a human. And of course that exists in the Old Testament, where you sacrifice your children to a god to appease them so that they will send rain and have good produce in the crops and those sorts of things. So they developed all sorts of baby sacrifices there, where you took a child and you put it in the arms of a very large idol that was hollow inside, that you built a fire inside of. And it had a system of leverage on it, that the arms were like this out front, all made out of metal. You laid the child on there, and then you tipped the lever, and the child went like this and dumped it through the mouth of the god into the burning chamber and burned the child alive. So that was sacrifice. And that's going on in the Old Testament. That god was called Molech. So you can see how far, once you get off of theism, how far down the rabbit trail, the hell trail that you can go, to where you're actually, in order to have a good crop next year, you sacrifice Bobby this year. You know, that's essentially what's going on. Okay, so anyway, back to page 27, which is basically as a summary page. So I've given you some optional reading, 7 different optional readings at the top there. All of those books are in my library. You can borrow them. Deb borrowed, which one? John
I've got
MacArthur's
number 4.
Think Biblically. So she read that chapter there. And so you can read through those, and they're basically just summarizations of the previous notes that we've taken. That's what we're doing there. So you can read MacDonald and see if you can relate it to our discussion about the existence of God. Explain the concepts of necessity and universality in discussing God's existence. What does Genesis 1:1 assume? That God is existence. He doesn't explain it. Why? Pick out your favorite and most understood argument for the existence of God and discuss it. And then look up intuitive in a dictionary. What is intuitive learning? And then see if you can draw the chart on page 26 and fill it in. So that's just kind of a summary. You're going to find it at the end of every section. Every time we change from, that was 1A's section, when we go to 2A. So they're like chapter summaries is what they are. So now we should be on page 28. And this is now beyond the introductory notes. We're now actually going to start discussing theology proper. You know how it fits on your green chart page. And you should now have snapped across from it a blue page, which is a copy of the first page out of the Westminster Shorter Catechism. And we are going to use question number 4 at the down towards the bottom of the blue page to actually segue into the parts that fit theology proper. Okay? And that'll become clearer here when we even turn the page. But let's do some introductory stuff. Excuse me here. So Westminster Shorter Catechism, 1647. So you can see this is old stuff. It's a long time ago stuff. When they were formulating, I've talked about catechisms before, I think. So a catechism is simply a document that teaches doctrine, teaches theology in a question and answer form. And so you can look down there and you can see the questions and the answers. So those of you who perhaps grew up within a more liturgical tradition like Catholicism or Lutheranism, you would be familiar with the word catechism. It makes sense to you. And you probably, if you grew up there in that church, you would have engaged in a catechetic type teaching when you were a young person. And maybe by the time you're 10, 11, 12, I don't remember where the break points are, and it probably changes from church to church. You then went before the board or the church or the pastor or the priest, and he asked you these questions and you answered them. So it's a form of learning, and it has value, very much value. So look at the first question there. What is the chief end of man? In other words, why are we here? What's our purpose? And the answer to it is that man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. So they're very theologically sound and based on Scripture. Now, the shorter catechism doesn't cite the reference points out of the Bible to support the answer, but the larger one does. So you would put 3 or 4 verses together that shows that the reason that we're here is to glorify God, not ourselves, but we are here to glorify God and to enjoy Him. That's the chief end of man. Question number 2, what rule, now it's Old English from 1640s, what rule hath God given to direct us how we may glorify and enjoy Him? And there you can see the answer, the Word of God. That's one way we can glorify Him, which is contained in the Scripture of the Old and New Testaments, and it is the only rule to direct us on how we may glorify and enjoy Him. So the source of knowing how to enjoy God and glorify Him is our Bible. And that's what that question number 2 is. Question number 3, what do the Scriptures principally teach? And the answer, the Scriptures principally teach what man is to believe concerning God and what duty God requires of him. So that's why we have a Bible, and that's what we use it for. Question number 4, what is God? Notice that it doesn't say who is God. It says what is God, because the questions are somewhat, they want you to think about the fact that you at this point don't even know that God is a who, okay? That He is a personage. He's not a force. So the question uses the word what, which is an ambiguous pronoun as opposed to a personal pronoun. So what is God? God is a spirit. He's infinite, eternal, and unchangeable in His being, His wisdom, His power, His glory, His holiness, His justness, His goodness, and His truth. Okay, so that is the answer to question 4. We are going to take question number 4, and we're going to build the whole rest of our curriculum from question number 4. Okay, that's why I've given it to you there. So, back over to page 28, your white page. What is a catechism? A catechism is a book containing a comprehensive summary of the principles of a religious creed, C-R-E-E-D, in the form of questions and answers. A creed is simply a formulation or an accepted system of religious beliefs. A creed is an accepted system of religious beliefs. So how would that translate into what we're doing in this class and what we hold as a church? Our doctrinal statement would be analogous to a creed. Okay, I think there's 19 paragraphs in the doctrinal statement now, I don't remember for sure. You guys that have been in my classes would have copies of the doctrinal statement, but you will each get a new one to put in this new binder so that you have a doctrine in printed form. You can just snap it in the back of your binder with each one of your ology textbooks so that you would know what this church holds as to a doctrine, a grouping of creeds. It's not going to be a question and answer form. That's a catechism used to teach, particularly young people, but it will still be a creed in the sense of that. So what would be analogous then as well, in addition to our doctrinal statement, would be all of the binders that you will get from me after 5 semesters. 10 semesters, 5 years. You will have a binder like this one that will have all of the creeds in hugely expanded form, something that in the doctrinal statement that the church holds, which I think is maybe 20 pages, I don't think it's even that, blown up into multiple pages on each one of those paragraphs. And that, of course, is the function of GBI, is to familiarize you with all the stuff that lies behind these highly abbreviated creeds and catechisms. Okay, so what's the Westminster Shorter Catechism? There's your blue page. Why is the Westminster Shorter Catechism and specific question 4 important to us? Well, first of all, we'll use that question to answer question 4 as a model for our discussion of what God is. And 2C, we generally call this God's attributes. That's your blank there. Attributes, the things we attribute to God. Sometimes people use the word characteristics, and you can use them interchangeably. So we generally call this God's characteristics or attributes. Either one works. And you can see them in 2C there. And then 3C, what if we took the answer to question number 4 and we actually put it in some kind of a chart form, in a graph form? Well, I did that for you, and it's on page 29. So there is the answer to question number 4 out of the Westminster Catechism in graphic form. So you can see at the top, God is, first of all, a spirit. Then he is infinite, eternal, and unchangeable in his, and then those 7 things. So be sure and understand that God is infinite in his being, he is eternal in his being, and he is unchangeable in his being. He is infinite, eternal, and unchangeable in his wisdom. He's infinite, eternal, and unchangeable in his holiness, and so on. So all 7 of those attributes. And we're going to look at each one of those individually. But we'll start with the very top box where it says Spirit. That's where we're going to start, and we'll just walk down through this chart. So the vast percentage of the remainder of this class, we will be segueing off of this page right here. Okay? There you can see in 4B on the top bottom of page 29 that we're looking at the fact that God is a spirit. What does it mean to be a spirit? Well, we think we know. We think we understand. We might think in modern culture, we might use the word ghost, okay, or force, or something like that. And so we need to kind of narrow this term down, because the word spirit is what is used in Scripture to describe God. It does tell us that he is a spirit. And yet in the Old English, if you grew up in the tradition of the King James Bible, like I did, you will read that the third person of the Trinity is called the Holy Ghost. But because of the burden of oddball understandings with the word ghost, we've kind of abandoned it, and we now use the word spirit. So in modern translations, you won't see the word ghost, because ghost has this idea of this kind of white floaty thing in a sheet, Casper kind of an idea. Casper the ghost, floating around somewhere or another. A disembodied spirit of some kind represented by a guy in a sheet with 2 eye holes in it. A Halloween costume kind of a thing. So there's too much baggage hooked onto the word ghost, so we use the word spirit now. Ghost is not an illegitimate term, it's just that it's kind of lost its accurateness in modern English. It's an old English term for a disembodied being. So let's do it here. 1C, bottom of page 29. In most systematic theology textbooks, and that would be many of these that I've cited for you on those review pages. Many of those are systematic theology textbooks, although the one that I gave to Deb is not necessarily a systematic theology textbook. But in most of them, you would find this section discussed under what's called God's essence, or God's immateriality. And I've cited there a couple of systematic theology textbooks from Geisler and also from Millard Erickson that is exactly how that book is laid out, those 2 books. So if you go to the table of contents and you want to read about God being a spirit, it's going to be under a header about God's immateriality or God's essence. In other words, what's he made out of? And of course the answer is nothing. He's not made out of anything. And you have to be careful there now, because we're talking the Trinity here, and we now know that the second person of the Trinity does have, since about 2,000 years ago, material substance. He was born a man, and he didn't drop that off in Acts chapter 1 when he ascended back to heaven. He didn't quit being physicality. He still retains his humanity. So he is the God-man. So next fall, if the Lord tarries and I'm still here and the world is still here and a whole bunch of other conditionals, the sequence of events in the green page for your systematic theology, we will teach the doctrine of Christology, the doctrine of the Son. And we'll talk about this blending of the, or it's actually not a blending, but the unique characteristics of the Son that was fully God, is fully God, but added to his nature humanity. And it's just baffling how that can even happen. We see it happen through what we call the virgin birth, the parthenogenesis, the birth, not totally non-natural birth, but God, the third person of the Trinity, the Spirit, enables it to happen in Mary's womb, and Jesus gets a body and grows up and so on. So remember that, and we'll discuss it here. I think I've got some notes in a page or so where we talk about God being a spirit except for the Son, who now has physicality. So when we talk about God being a spirit, you have to keep that little wiggle in your head clear, even though it's difficult. Okay, so 2C, then the key proof text. Now remember, we talked about proof texts last week, and I said that they are legitimate. We can use proof texts. We just have to be careful we don't drag them out of context. And that is John chapter 4 and verse 24. So somebody read that one for us. Tell us what the context is in John 4. Who's talking, who's being talked to, that sort of thing. And then read for us the 24th verse. All together now, one at a time.
For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth.
Okay, that's verse 24. So Dennis, in looking there, who heard those words?
The woman at the well.
The woman at the well, yeah.
Oh.
So this is the woman the Samaritan woman at the well, and she's quizzing Jesus because she knows he's a Jew, and he stops at this well and he has a conversation with her about water, and she brings up this topic about, well, where should we worship? I'm a Samaritan woman, and we worship on this mountain, and you guys worship in Jerusalem. Which is the right one? She's trying to catch him in a kind of a Jewish quiz trap thing here, see? And he answers her question number 24, or verse number 24, where he says, God's a spirit. Honestly, neither place is the only place. Every place works because he's everywhere, because he is immaterial. He doesn't have a body. And yet here is the God-man, probably seated on a stone or something there beside the well, in physical flesh, who is also God, telling her that God is a spirit. So we got to keep that straight in our heads, that the second person of the Trinity.
Did she get it?
What's that?
Did she understand it?
I don't think so. The context there indicates that her reaction to the whole conversation is more concerned about her living conditions. He tells her that she's been married 5 times and the guy she's with now isn't her husband. So this is the 5th guy or 6th guy, and of course here he is, divine in physical form, but he can read her heart. I mean, she didn't have a placard hanging on the front of her that says, married 5 times, living with a guy, but I'm not married to. She didn't that then. She didn't tell him that. He gets that out of her mind, and he knows it because he's God. And so we see that the passage there, if you go on and read further into it, that she's concerned about that, her morality, her moral level, her sin. So I think probably the verse 24 that we're kind of concentrating on here might have just went over the top of her head, because there's no verse 25 that says, and she, having understood perfectly what Jesus told her, decided not to worship at her church anymore. It doesn't say that there. So at any rate, probably didn't get it. And even you and I, having 50 hindsight that works perfectly, and going back and reading the story and putting all the pieces together, plus all of the other New Testament texts, plus the Old Testament text, we still are like, well, what is a spirit? What does this mean? How can you be a being that doesn't have material substance?
But if you read on in 25, it says the woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he.
So she is aware of a Jewish Messiah coming, a Savior. That's what Messiah means, Savior. I don't remember in exegeting that particular group of verses there to say, does that tell us that she understood verse 24? I would say no.
No.
She's just bringing up another question.
No.
And he answers that question by saying, it's me. Essentially, that's what he says. I'm it. But notice also that I don't think there's another verse that says, and she, having understood that perfectly, fell down and worshiped him. That didn't happen either. So I'm guessing that an awful lot of, in her mind, was kind of circling around sin as he had confronted her about her unmarried condition.
Well, she was still questioning it in verse 29.
What's that say?
Come, see a man who told me all the things that I have done. Is this not the Christ?
Yeah. That is interesting that she goes home, wherever this little village is next to the well, and brings a bunch of people back out and says, come and look at this guy. Come and listen to this guy. So it's going to be interesting if she's in glory to visit with this lady and ask her, when Jesus told you that you had to worship him in spirit, did you understand that? She got part of it, obviously, because she's got some kind of not just conviction for sin, but also conviction for recognizing that he is perhaps the guy that they're looking for. See, you guys understand the difference between the Jews and the Samaritans. You understand what's going on there?
No.
This means yes, this means no. Okay. Well, in the when the Babylonian captivity occurred in the Old Testament, when the Jews were taken into captivity, remember that it happened in two phases. That the government of Israel had split into two different groups. There was the northern 10 tribes, and there was the southern 2 tribes. And the northern 10 tribes went into captivity first under the Assyrians. And some years later, like a lot of years later, like 100 years later, I don't remember exactly the years, but the southern 2 tribes finally went into captivity under the Babylonians. So the Assyrian Empire had fallen, the Babylonian Empire had come on the scene, they come back and take the southern 2 tribes into captivity. So eventually all 12 tribes of Israel are taken into captivity. And of course, the ones that had gone in under the Assyrian rule are now being put into the Babylonian rule. So we're talking over in Mesopotamia, the land between the 2 rivers, Meso, Middle, Potamos, River Horse, where do we get hippopotamus from? So between the rivers, see, that's where the land of the Assyrians and the Babylonians were at over there. And anyway, they're taken out of their land over there, and a remnant is left behind. And we're talking, I'm going to probably make some bad words here, but the dirty guys get left behind. So and that's a very poor. But what I'm saying is the ones that really didn't matter, the sheep herders and the farmers, the ones with dirt under their fingernails and manure on their boots. They were left in the land of Israel, the old land, see. But everybody else was taken. So who was taken? It was the elites, the rulers. So this is where Daniel comes into the picture. He's one of the brainy guys, along with his 3 companions. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are all part of that consortium that gets taken into captivity because they've got brains. And they're educated, and they're the elites of the culture. But you leave the other guys behind because somebody has to take care of the sheep and the fields and so on. Well, in the time period of about 70 years, when the captivity's duration occurred, it took about a generation and a half for the 70 years to transpire, almost 2 generations. A generation is considered to be about 30 years. So a good two generations, and so we're looking at a time span there where something's been happening back in old Israel with the farmers and the sheep herders and the dirt clod guys. See, the people like you and me that would have got left behind. So they are being influenced deeply by the ancient Canaanite culture that's still in circulation there, because the Israelites under Joshua never did completely eliminate that Canaanite culture. So these people left behind intermarried into them and adapted many of their ideas. So they became paganistic in their belief system. So now when the Jews at the end of the 70 years that are coming out of captivity, as per the rule by Cyrus the Great, by the way, we have an archaeological document that shows that they were allowed to go back. So now we enter this time period in the Old Testament of Ezra and Nehemiah, where they're going back and rebuilding the walls and all that sort of thing. Well, all these guys that were still got left behind are now 2 generations in paganism. And they don't like these Jews coming back because it's now going to interfere with the fact that they have their own belief system, and they're going to build the cities of Jerusalem and the walls and the temple and all this stuff. We don't like this. They're coming back now, and they are the pure Jews. They've kept themselves in purity, even in captivity. So we have this diametric, separatistic type of thing that occurs. We've got pure ethnic Jews, and we've got polluted Jews, half-Jews. And so the Jews, the pure Jews, they called them dogs, that they were had profaned their heritages by intermarrying into these Canaanite cultures and evidenced it in. So by the time of Christ now, we're looking at multiple generations of dogism and Judaism living side by side with one another, to the point where the pure Jews would not even go through the land where these people lived, which was north of Jerusalem, a pretty good piece of land there that was now called Samaria. And they wouldn't even go through it. They would go over and cross the Jordan River and go up on the far side over where the country of Jordan is now, and travel in order to go up to their northern area of territory in Galilee, where Jesus grew up. So this chunk of land in between, occupied by the dogs, this is where the woman's living. Well, guess what? Jesus doesn't choose to go out and go around. He chooses to go through Samaria and encounters the Samaritan woman at the well. Well, we can look at that and say, why in the world did he do that? Was he not a good Jew? Well, he was accused of not being one by many of the pure Jews. But in reality, what he was doing was seeking to save people that were even from the dog culture. So that's this encounter then that we encounter here, that the woman at the well. And so that's the history, as I can try to abbreviate it and pull it back together again from 45 different sources and 50 years of reading books. Judy.
Dave, I want to ask you if today the Jews do not believe in Jesus, right? Do I understand that right? There's some that do, but some that don't.
I heard about half of it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Modern Jews don't
I'll
believe
come
in it.
closer.
No, I just want, you can say it for me. The Jews today now don't believe in Jesus.
Well, yes, that, of course, now we're 2,000 years away from the woman at the well, and the Judaism and the Samaritanism is gone. It's all Jewish nation now. There
And
is
they
no.
don't believe in Jesus.
There is a remnant of Samaritans that still live there, and they have their own Bible. It's called the Samaritan Pentateuch, and they are what we would call ethnic Samaritans. But to answer your question, yes, Orthodox Jews do not believe that Christ was the Messiah. And we can see the beginnings of that even in the Gospels, where they rejected Christ and they crucified him. And we can see it even down through the book of Acts, which records the early history of the church, in the fact that the Jews would reject Paul's message. You remember that, where did Paul go first every time he entered a city? He went to the synagogue to speak to the Jewish people. And they would reject him, and then he would go to the Gentiles, the dogs. So, yeah, that's the way it is. So you've got to remember that most all people systems, cultures, and religious systems have all sorts of flavors within them. We see that even in our culture. If we talk about church in Miles City, we've got churches over here that have a system of belief that wouldn't agree with our church. And then you go across the street and there's another church that has a different system of beliefs, of different little wiggles within the. So even in our culture, we see these variations. And so within the Jewish, modern Jewish culture, there's all sorts of flavors. The most graphic ones that you would see that would be the real sticklers, what we would call pure Orthodox Jews, would be the Hasidic Jews. The men who you see pictures of them that wear that funny looking tall hat that's got kind of a fur brim on the top of it, and they have their hair here's got a long locks hanging down the sides, and they wear the phylacteries on their arms and the phylactery on their foreheads and so on. Those are Hasidic Jews. They're very, very Orthodox, to the point where even now there has been some, because of the Gaza Strip thing with the Palestinians, the Hasidic Jews had been exempt from serving in the military. And now we're seeing some flack from the normal Jews saying, well, you guys shouldn't be exempt. Who are you to say that you shouldn't serve in the military just because of your religious beliefs? You're a Jew, you should be fighting for your country. So we see even differentiational splits and so on within Judaism. So that would be the extreme, would be Hasidic Judaism. And then, of course, on the other side, it would be Jews that were so liberal they don't do anything but Judaism. They're Jews by ethnicity, but not Jews necessarily by faith. Dennis?
So I was on a plane last week, and there was a couple. I mean, the guy that you just described. So who do they believe in? Who is their
They're still
God?
waiting. They're still waiting for the Messiah to come back. They believe in the God of the Old Testament, no question.
Are you kidding me?
No, not at all. But they're still waiting for the Messiah. Yeah, he hasn't come yet.
After 2,000 years, they're still
Well, it's
waiting.
more than 2,000, but they've been waiting since the Garden of Eden, since Genesis 3:15.
Huh. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, sure, they're still waiting. He hasn't come yet. Yeah, good stuff to visit with. I'm glad you guys are asking questions. And thank God I can dredge up enough memory of stuff reading that I can halfway answer the thing. And I'll go home and probably mull over this, and next week I'll come back and say, now what I told you there isn't completely right in this area, and I'll have to qualify what I said. But at any rate,
Dave, I want to ask you, what are the Jews that believe in Jesus called?
Messianic Jews.
Messianic.
Yeah, Messianic Jews.
What do they look like?
Yeah.
What
Well,
do they wear?
they don't dress differently. They would be simply, there's a whole movement called Jews for Jesus. It's an evangelical ministry that seeks to convert Jews. And you have to think now too that many of these Jews in the world, they're spread all over the world now. New York has a huge population of Jews. Probably most of whom aren't Hasidic in nature. I'm guessing there's probably some of them there that are. But they're sinners just like you and I. I mean, they need Christ as their Savior, just like you and I do. And so, if you go to a Jew who is of the persuasion that he really doesn't practice Judaism, he doesn't go to synagogue. He wouldn't be any different than a Gentile guy that doesn't go to church. So he needs Christ just like you and I do. And so many of these movements to evangelize the Jewish people tend to concentrate on those kinds of Jewish people that are just living life, making money, buying red Corvettes and on a bigger house, just like every other American, you know. And so their conviction for sin is in some ways easier than the ones that are wearing the curly locks and they're Orthodox Jews, because those guys are almost fanatical in their belief that Jesus wasn't the Messiah. And so they're harder to deal with, harder to convert than just the guy who's a sinner and happens to be a Jew by ethnicity.
So you ever been to the Chicago Board of Trade?
No. Been to Chicago lots of times, but not the border.
90% of the people there are the Jews with the
The little black cap thing on their head. Yeah.
Little
Now
cap.
that's that's not quite as rigid as the Hasidic Jew, but they are definitely identifying with Judaism. So you see, there's another branch or flavor of that faith.
And they're still waiting for the Messiah?
Yeah, sure.
These guys?
Yep.
The little cup.
Yep.
All Jews are.
I know, it's confusing.
Okay.
We are, just to let you know, Missions Committee, we're having a Jewish speaker here in March.
Oh,
Good,
And
good idea.
He's gonna do the cedar, what do they call it? The cedar?
Cedar, that's C-E-D-E-R?
What are you saying? I
That's
lost
what I hear all day long.
the mission agency.
Huh?
The mission agency. Is that what you're asking?
Our missionary that
Oh, I
is
don't remember his name.
a missionary.
It used
that
to be
is
called
Jewish. He
the
is-
American Board of Missions for the Jews. But it has changed its name now. It's
The chosen people.
Chosen people.
Chosen
Chosen People Ministries.
Yes.
That's what it's called. Yeah.
He's coming in March,
Yes.
and he's going to do the, is it called the cedar? The
Yeah,
cedar?
which is the Passover
Yeah,
ceremony.
the Passover meal.
Yeah, so be sure and go and ask him and listen. He will, I think, present as actually from the pulpit. I can't remember what the venue will be when he comes, but we haven't had a representative for that particular mission agency for a long time, and so Mark Henning, who is the board person in charge of missions, made arrangements to have him come, and they're coming in March. I don't remember dating.
It'll be an evening service.
Is it? Okay. So be sure and keep that in your hat to come and do that. And he's going to present the Orthodox Jewish form of the Passover ceremony, with the bitter herbs and the shank bone and the unleavened bread,
Honey.
in which the preceding, that is the Old Testament preceding ceremony that predates our communion service. And he will show us the meanings in it and all of that. So this will be a man who is a Jew by ethnicity and a Christian by faith. So that's who he will have him come. So that'll be good. Answer many of these kind of questions way better than I can. So anyway, are we on page 30 yet?
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, it's
Are
how
we ready for page 30? We looked at the John 4:24 and we chased a whole bunch of little cottontail rabbits there, but that's all right. Top of page 30 then. Theologians, we're talking about God's being a spirit. Okay, get our brains back into that groove again. So theologians thus say that being a spirit, God is, first of all, immaterial. immaterial, immaterial. In other words, he has no material substance or essence. There is no atomic structure. There's not even air or gas or disassociated molecules of any kind of substance. There's nothing there. It's no material substance whatsoever. That's immateriality. Okay. And then secondly, 2D, he is said to be incorporeal. 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 An easy way to remember that is the note that I have there under 2D. In other words, he has no physicalness. He not only doesn't have any material substance, there is no physicality there. So remember that this word, it's actually word. So it's misspelled there. You've got W-O-R-K, it's W-O-R-D. That this word I'm speaking about, incorporeal, contains the word corpse in the middle of it. You see that? And it is saying then he has no corporeal. A corpse is a dead body. Okay, it has substance, even though it's dead. Grandma in the casket is dead, and we say that's her corpse. But you could still reach out and touch her and squeeze her hand and all those sort of things. She's still there physically. But we're saying that God doesn't have that. He has no material substance, no physicality whatsoever. So he's immaterial and he's incorporeal. So Jesus is specifically addressing this idea in that Luke passage that we looked at, that Dennis read for it, where he says that a spirit doesn't have, no, this is a different passage, Luke 24:39. A spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have. So this is Jesus after the resurrection. And we won't look at it here right now, but it's the passage in which Jesus appears to his disciples, and they're troubled because they think, well, this must be his ghost. His spirit can't be him real. And he says, no. I have corporeal substance. I have materiality. I'm really here. And then he goes on and proves it by eating a meal with them. And I always think of there's some kind of funny things that happen. And if you've ever watched the movie Casper, with a little boy, the family moves into this old mansion, and it's occupied by Casper and his brothers. The brothers are hoodlums, but Casper is a really nice little ghost. And he always helps his brothers out and makes meals for them and all this kind of, you might have to watch it. It's a kid's kind of a movie, but it's kind of funny to see what they've done with the idea of corporeality and incorporeality, in that Casper doesn't have, he can float through walls, but if he's holding, for example, he's getting lunch ready or something for his brothers, and so he goes into the refrigerator to get a bottle of pop, and he can come out just seep through the door of the refrigerator like a ghost can, but he can't get the bottle of pop to come through the door, so he has to open the door. So that's kind of an examination of corporeality and incorporeality. And then the next thing is that the brothers, these three ugly brothers who are hoodlums, they're always scaring everybody away so they can live in the mansion by themselves, but Casper likes friends, and anyway, it goes on from there. But when he feeds them, they all sit down and they're gluttons, and they sit there and eat, but all of the food is just going through and falling on the floor into their chairs. So I always think of that when I think of this Luke 24 passage, in that Jesus proves that he has material substance. He doesn't eat a piece of fish and it falls on the floor through the bottom of his body. He has material substance. My guess is, it doesn't say that, but it made crunching sounds when he ate the fried fish. And they could see his throat work when he swallowed it. And all of that sort of thing. That's what he's telling them here. I'm not a ghost. They have this, the disciples had this understanding that ghosts have this Casperish kind of existence. See, they can seep through keyholes and under the crack of the door and all this kind of things. And yet this material substance body of Jesus is a glorified body which has phenomenal capabilities. The implication and picture for us, as I've said, I think in other classes like this, is that is apparently what our bodies in a glorified form will be like. That Jesus' glorified body after his resurrection, before his ascension, you remember he spends about 50 days on earth talking to multiple people, the disciples, all kinds of people. It's only at the day of Pentecost, just before it in Acts chapter 1, that he actually ascends. So anyway, he spends that kind of time talking and walking and eating and everything with his disciples and other people. They see him, they interact with him. And so in that time period, he can do things that are not normal for a normal, non-glorified human body. For example, the disciples are meeting in that same upper room, apparently, that they had communion taught to them. And in Matthew 5, somewhere there, all of a sudden he appears in the room. He doesn't open the door. He doesn't seep through the keyhole. He doesn't, whispering underneath the crack on the bottom of the door. He's just there. Human bodies can't do that. You can't materialize and dematerialize yourself at will. That's not possible. But his glorified body can do that, and yet it has corporeality. It has material substance that he can sit down and eat with him, and it doesn't fall on the floor, and yet he can pop into a room without coming through the door. How about Acts chapter 1, when he ascends? It doesn't say, and a large spaceship came down, or the Silver Surfer came and got him and took him up into the cloud. No, he just ascends. So he can defy gravity. I can't do that. I can't fly, just ascend up into the sky, but it says there that that's what he does. So Jesus is making a point of telling these disciples in 3D there at the top of page 30 that I have material substance, even though it's different, it's glorified, it's powerful, but it's real. You can touch me. And you can see that that's exactly what does Jesus ask Thomas to do?
Touch his hands and his feet.
Touch me, touch my hands, touch my side. In some ways that's kind of gross, but the implication there in the text is that poke your finger in the hole where the nails came out. Push your fingers into the hole in the side where the spear went in. I would have loved to have been a mouse in the corner there to see that, and to see the dawning of realization in Thomas's eyes as he experienced that. Now, those scars, by the fact that he retains them after his resurrection, the implication is that they will always be there, even in eternity. We will see he doesn't get this purified, glowing, I'm 18 years old, virile and buff and all this kind of stuff, but that he will actually retain those scars. Probably for our example, so that every time we look at him, we are reminded of what it cost him. The holes pierced in his scalp here where the crown of thorns went in and all that kind of stuff. But yet disappear and reappear at will. So, we got about 6 minutes here. Let's do 4C. So we've belabored the point quite extensively here to say that God doesn't have a body. So now 4C says, well, there's a problem here because we have passages of Scripture that talk about God having body parts. So some examples are given to you there. Somebody look up Exodus 3, somebody look up Exodus 6, and somebody else look up Isaiah 37. I've given you the body parts that are given, for example, but let's look at the verses as they are actually written in the text. So Exodus 3, somebody there already? Yep.
Yeah, 3:20.
3:20.
I can read it.
Brent, you go ahead and read this for us, real loud.
ESV. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go.
Okay, so context. What's happening here?
Striking them.
This is Egypt. This is the plagues. And what's the body part? Well, I've written it here for you in your white pages, but it's God saying, I will strike you with my hand. I'm going to whack you. That brings to mind another segue. I remember seeing a cartoon when I was younger in which there's this guy on the street carrying a sign that says, God is dead. And coming out of the clouds is an arm that's just going to go. God's hand, in reality, squashing the guy on the sidewalk. So there it says now, I will do something with my hand, see? And the plagues of Egypt are, of course, the hand of God working there. So what then about a couple chapters later in Exodus 6? Somebody read that one for us, verse 6.
Exodus 6:6, and this is the NIV. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I'll redeem you with an outstretched arm and with a mighty act of judgment. Okay, that arm, see? My outstretched arm. Sure sounds like, you've got this hairy arm, coming out of the bathrobe. I don't know how you try to visualize God, this childish picture in your head of God the Father. I particularly think of it when I read the account there in Exodus with Moses on the mountain, and Moses says, can you show me you? He says, I can't do that. Well, essentially, I'm paraphrasing horribly here, but the idea is that you wouldn't survive it if I revealed myself to you. And so it says he turned and Moses sees his backside. And I get this picture, of an old rumpled brown bathrobe with, long bathrobe with long white hair out the back of it, and some kind of a rope belt, and that's God. Well, and then this hairy arm coming out of the bathrobe, see? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a child's picture of it as we try to envision the non-corporeal God. We think of this, who was the cartoonist that, I've lost it here now, that did so many of those goofy cartoons, and he would draw God with eyebrows that looked like lightning bolts coming off of him. Gary Larson, if you remember any of the Gary Larson cartoons. They're funny as all get out, but at any rate, he always drew God kind of this hunched figure with the big long bathrobe and lightning bolts for eyebrows. So we're getting this picture, see, with this incorporeal being
that's being talked about as having hands and an arm. So then the Isaiah passage is what? What does that one say? Isaiah 37:17.
Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. And listen to all the words of Sennacherib, who sent them to reproach the living God.
So we got eyes and ears here now. So you get the idea that Mr. Isaiah says, wake up and look. Pay attention. Listen. Open your ears up. Open your eyes up. What did you do? Go away on vacation or something? Pay attention here. Well, what do we do with verses like that? That's what we're talking about right under 4C. So this is 2D now, if we look at the passage. Those are only a few of the examples where it talks about God's hand and God's eyes. And another one would be in the book of Genesis, where God is said to look down and see the tower. And so let us go down. Almost this, let's jump in the chariot, see, and come out of the clouds. It's almost Zeusy kind of Nordic god, kind of a picture of a creature with lightning bolts and power in the clouds, and it's white horses and all this kind of stuff coming down. He's going to come down and wreak vengeance on people. So what do we do with that kind of language in Scripture? Because it's definitely there. We can't just say, just blow it away. So 2D, it's not a problem as we see that this language is being used to accommodate man's thinking. We can't conceptualize a being who has no material substance but yet can act and interact and see things and pay attention to things without having organs like eyes and ears and hands and arms and feet. We just, it's nearly impossible for us to imagine what that must be like. So we give this idea a big word. Theologians love big words, and here's another one. And that's the 3D there. That language is called anthropomorphisms. And you can see that it's made up of two Greek words, anthropos, which is the Greek word for man. So you've probably encountered this word in the study of man's culture and so on in a college class called anthropology. So that's the Greek word for man. And morphos is the Greek word for form. And we use that word when we talk about morphing, something morphing. How about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? It's kind of a goofy cartoon, people, of some years ago, but they were morphing. See, they were changing or had form. To metamorphize, we say that's what is happening during the process of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. They're metamorphizing. They're changing their form. So anthropomorphisms is a human form, a man form. So this language where it talks about God as having human characteristics of physicality simply accommodates our language so that we can better understand God is going to do something. God notices things. And we would pray, as Isaiah does. I'm praying that you notice. Even though in some senses it's for our benefit that we even pray something like that because God already knows. And so then 4D, it's a language speaking of God as though he were in the form of a man, yet we know that he sees and he hears and he touches and all the other things with no need of having the sensory organs that we have to have in order to accomplish those kinds of things. He doesn't need those, but yet it's language that talks as if he does. So they're called anthropomorphisms. They're done for our sake. So we're going to have to quit there for today. And we will continue on with point 5C at the bottom there. We look at these guys, and they were heavily influenced by what we would call theism, but they were run off in the weeds with a God who went away somewhere. He didn't intervene anymore.